So hello everyone, welcome to Travel Tuesday. I'm thrilled to welcome back Cara Matthew from Quark Expedition. We've had a couple of great presentations already from Cara about different destinations, and I'm thrilled to bring her back to talk about Quark in general, but also Antarctica in specific. Quark is a great expedition partner of mine, part of the Virtuoso Network, and I'm thrilled to have Cara with us here today. So Cara, with that, let me turn it over to you and away to go.
Thank you so much, Sheila. It's such a pleasure to be back. And what's neat too is we'll focus really on crossing the Antarctic Circle, this great bucket list. If you're going to Antarctica, why not cross and go into the Antarctic Circle? But I just wanted to say too, I love partnering with Sheila because Sheila's so knowledgeable in so many other areas of the planet and adventure travel in general. So it's wonderful when you're choosing a trip to be with an advisor, especially like Sheila, because there's so much knowledge that she has, but I also love how closely I get to work with her. So whenever there's questions along with a trip that you're thinking about taking or a trip that you've already booked with Sheila, it's neat that Sheila's always interacting with the suppliers that she's working with and these amazing companies that are going to really phenomenal places. So I'm delighted to be here with all of you today and Sheila. So thank you so much for inviting me. So for those of you who don't know who I am Cara Matthew. I am one of the senior business development managers at Quark Expeditions. I have been with the company for over 12 years now, and I absolutely love where we go and what we do. And what's funny is when I first started at Quark, or before I actually even started, I thought, Antarctica, you can go to Antarctica. I thought that was just left for BBC film crew, documentary specialists, or scientists. And when I realized that a company was traveling there to share guests' experiences and for travelers to explore the ends of the earth, I thought, what an amazing opportunity. So I'm thrilled to have been with the company for so long and only doing polar travel. And that is one of the biggest differentiators between Quark Expeditions and a lot of other companies that go to the Arctic and Antarctica is that we only do polar. A lot of other companies go to other areas of the world. Maybe they do Africa and Fiji and do other areas of the world, but Quark is really uncompromisingly polar. And I always say, try and say that 10 times fast, uncompromisingly polar. But we've been in business for nearly 30 years. And we were the first company to bring passengers to the North Pole in 1991, which is still a trip we do today. And I was actually even engaged at the North Pole on the bow of this 50 Years of Victory ship that you see there in the background on the left there. So in 2010, that was my first polar experience. I went up to the Arctic Circle and went right to the North Pole. I did not see Santa Claus because I went in July and Santa Claus is on vacation. Apparently, he's fishing in Norway at the time, but it was a remarkable destination, and it really got me hooked on traveling to the polar regions. And so I wanted to just share with you too who travels to the polar regions, especially with Quark Expeditions, because there are generally four types of travelers that come to both polar regions with Quark Expeditions. And you might find that you're one of these types of travelers, or three, or maybe even all four. Some of you might be like, oh, I'm an escapist and I'm an adventurer. And so that is one of the biggest travelers that comes with us, though, is the checklister. Those that want to see penguins and check that off their list, or see polar bears, or step on the seventh continent in Antarctica, and it's their seventh continent they're exploring. So depending on what you're wanting to check off your bucket list, you'll probably find some like-minded travelers with us. We also have the learners that come and travel with us. So if you really love those educational experiences when you're traveling, that's a big component of what Quark Expeditions does. We have biologists, geologists, glaciologists, historians. We even have a penguinologist that comes with us to Antarctica for a lot of our departures to do scientific research. So it's a really exciting part of the program. And so if you are a learner, even what I'll talk about near the end of the presentation is not only do we have educational programs throughout, But I love the onboard learning that happens even when you're out on deck and you're witnessing maybe a whale or an iceberg. The expedition team are always going around sharing with what you're seeing and sharing points and educational points, and you can always ask them questions. And that's really what I love so much about our trips too. But we also have the escapist that travels with Quark expeditions to the ends of the earth. Those people who want to get away from it all. So you might be wanting to get in the heart of nature, unplugging from your devices. Yes, we do have Wi-Fi on our ships, and so you can log in and check your email and what have you if you want. But a lot of people are wanting to unplug. I think the wellness industry is really picking up, wanting yoga and that out of the box, in the heart of nature type of experiences. So that's also who travels with Quark expeditions. And the adventurer. If you're really have an adventurous spirit, I really do believe that being on a ship in a small little vessel in these remote locations really isn't adventurous enough. But then if you want to have more activity, there's things like hiking and kayaking. And so it can be a really active trip depending on where you're going with Quark Expedition. So if you're an active adventurer traveler, these trips are definitely for you as well. But they're for all ages. We're a minimum of 8 years old, all the way up to, we even had a 99-year-old on board. That was a fantastic expedition member, a great guest on board. So, and everyone in between. So I love maps. So I do have a few maps to share with you because there is so much to see when we talk about Antarctica. There is the actual peninsula itself, this finger of land that's the closest to South America. But I feel that the subantarctic regions aren't talked about a lot either. So there's South Georgia, as well as the Falkland Islands. And let Sheila know if you want to, I could do literally a presentation on just the Falklands and South Georgia alone. So that, please reach out to Sheila if you'd like to have more information on those areas. South Georgia is the home to over 200,000 king penguins, the second largest penguin species, a species that you wouldn't see in Antarctica. So that's just something to keep in mind. But there's trips as little as 8 days, all the way up to 23 days, and everything in between. So depending on how long you want to go away for or how long you want to spend in Antarctica. So I just wanted to navigate a little bit Antarctica. I know probably a lot of you are well versed in maps, but I really like, looking at, again, another map just to give a bit of perspective on where Antarctica is. So let's dive in to one of the most remote places on the planet, because Antarctica is the Earth's most southern continent. But what I love is that I didn't know it was the fifth largest continent until just some time ago. It's 14 million square kilometers. So a fun fact for a virtual night or a dinner table around with your family, it's twice the size of Australia, and approximately 98% is covered in ice. So as much as we think that, oh, it's so cold there, why would I want to go? Because it is covered in so much ice. But just remember, some of the best times to go is when we're traveling is in their summer. So even though you're thinking 98% covered in ice, it must be really cold there. Yes, it is cold, but when we're going in their months of summer or spring or early fall, it's not as cold as people think it is. So we typically travel to Antarctica the beginning of October all the way to the beginning of April. So it's a very big window, lots to see and do. I honestly believe there's no bad time to go to Antarctica. It's just if you want to see different things. And so, when you're thinking of going to Antarctica, definitely you might want to ask Sheila, or maybe if you're not thinking about Antarctica, you kind of ask, well, why Antarctica? Like, why would I want to go there? And so I really do believe that travelers are motivated by different things. But I mentioned the seventh continent. I personally was very motivated by that. I went to Antarctica with my 66-year-old aunt at the time when we went in 2012. I think some of you who have been on previous presentations may have heard me talk about her before, my Aunt Lucy. And it was a bucket list for her, standing on the seventh continent. She had traveled so much already, Asia, Africa. And so she was thrilled to come to Antarctica with me and do it as a niece and aunt trip. But if you're a wildlife enthusiast, someone who has a strong desire to see wildlife, definitely a highlight. I love going to destinations that have wildlife. I went to India to see the tigers as well. And so if, seeing things in their natural habitat, seeing creatures in their natural habitat is just wonderful. So if that's on your list, definitely think about going to Antarctica. And also, though, if you're a well-seasoned traveler, you've probably booked a lot of trips with Sheila or thinking of booking a lot of trips. If you're a well-seasoned traveler in general and you just want to experience a new environment, definitely those are the types of travelers that are thinking of going to Antarctica or travel to Antarctica.
And Laura's just mentioning when she was there one time in January, it was 14 degrees. So I think we had 14 degrees here in Ottawa today in March, and everybody's ecstatic. So you can imagine 14 degrees in January in Antarctica would not be the norm, but you'll take it, right?
That's such a great point. I love that, Laura. Yeah, because January's peak summer. So January, when I was there in February, there was a day where it was +7, no wind. The sun was shining, and I tied my parka around my waist and was walking around um, on that continental landing that day with, a fleece sweater and a little shell. So yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing. It can range, even in November, December, it can range between -4, -5 degrees Celsius and +5, just depending on the wind too. So I really think people are like, oh, it's so cold. Why would I want to go there? So thanks for bringing that up, Laura. That's great. But I feel like a commonly asked question too is, how do I get there? We do have Fly the Drake program. So if you do get seasick or if you're short on time, definitely ask Sheila about our 8-day and 11-day fly cruise departures, where you'll fly from Punta Arenas, Chile, and you'll fly across the infamous Drake Passage, and you'll land in Antarctica and then get on the comfort of the vessel there. Have a great trip. That's probably 5 days, or a longer trip if you choose an 11-day trip. So you're still spending a same amount of time on the peninsula, and then you fly back, or you can sail the Drake Passage. Now, a lot of people want that badge of honor to sail the Drake Passage. I personally think there's also a lot of excitement that's built up when you're crossing the Drake Passage and getting out on deck and maybe seeing an albatross if you're a birder and you want to check that albatross bird off of your list. Lots of opportunities to potentially see albatross as well while you're crossing the Drake Passage. It was my first iceberg experience crossing the Drake Passage in a way where I saw a penguin, because I did see some icebergs heading up to there was a lot of ice going to the North Pole because we were breaking through about 9 feet of ice. But what was neat about Antarctica is my first piece of ice that I saw had a little penguin on it. He just kind of jumped right up on that iceberg. So there's a lot of exciting things to anticipate when you're crossing the Drake Passage by sea. So there are 2 ways with Quark expeditions to get to the Antarctic Peninsula. But with this trip today, because we are really focused on an amazing group that Sheila's put together for February of 2022. So what we're focused on is the getting there with the ship crossing the Drake Passage. So if you, again, to look at that little map there, so we're starting in Ushuaia, the southern town in our Ushuaia. And so you can fly to Ushuaia. There's one night included in Ushuaia, and then on day 2 in the afternoon, we get on the ship, and then we cross the Drake Passage. Now, I usually call the Drake Passage, it's known as either the Drake Lake, and it can be really smooth, or the Drake Shake. And so one night on my sailing down to Antarctica, it was a bit rough for me. So I took the patch too, the scalpamine patch, and I had that. But there was another crossing on the way back on that same trip where it was completely calm and I was fine, and I loved getting out on board and getting out on deck, and mingling with passengers in the dining room and the lounge. So it just depends. And someone can always ask me, is it the Drake Passage less motion sickness would I get less motion sickness in November versus January versus March? And honestly, in November or December on one crossing, it can be fine. 8 hours later, it can be rough. Same thing in December, same thing in January, February. So there is it's very unpredictable. But it's called the convergence, in the Drake Passage, which makes the Drake Passage so rough, known as one of the roughest bodies of water in the world, technically. But it is because of the convergence. When you're crossing the Drake Passage, it's the bodies of water converging. And so I honestly, I get very seasick, but I'm so glad I did the Drake Passage. I'm so grateful that I can share people that I experienced it. And also it was, again, that anticipation of going to Antarctica. And then on the way back, it was neat. I saw a pod of dolphins on the way back coming, which is something that I would never have gotten if I had taken the fly cruise experience. So again, unique experiences, always getting out on deck, always going in the bridge. We have open bridge policies on all of our ships. So it's really neat to kind of go in the bridge and be on the lookout for wildlife with our expedition team as well. Because when you reach the Antarctic Peninsula and you have an Antarctic landing, you forget all about if you even did have a little bit of motion, and it was a little bit of the Drake shake on the way down. So our Antarctic Peninsula is just so beautiful, and it's an exquisite isolation. It's just so beautiful that I forgot all about it on one occasion when I went down there, that I was a little seasick on the way there. I forgot all about it. It was just so worth it. And so the trip that we really are focusing on is Sheila's amazing group. So from February 22nd to March 7th in 2022. So you'll cross the Antarctic Circle, going right into 66 degrees south. And I put this Buenos Aires to Ushuaia because I highly recommend, when you're chatting with Sheila about inquiring about this trip, to have Sheila book a couple nights for you in Buenos Aires before booking the flights down to Ushuaia. I loved seeing a tango show. Me and my aunt, we went to the Rojo Tango Show, and we had a great dinner and a great time. I loved walking some areas, the Recoleta district. And so highly recommend, if you're going to Ushuaia, to maybe stop a couple nights in Buenos Aires to break up the flights and just to see a city if you haven't seen Buenos Aires before. So this trip is 14 days. So day 1 is in Ushuaia. Day 2 is embarking the ship, like I mentioned, in the afternoon. You can spend a little time walking around the cute town of Ushuaia, as well as maybe doing a little bit of light walking or some hiking in Terra del Fuego National Park, which is about 20 minutes outside of Ushuaia, before crossing the Drake Passage and going to Antarctica. So a lot of the trips go to the peninsula, and the peninsula is really popular because it's the most concentration of wildlife in Antarctica, and that is a really big highlight for people. So this is the trip that we're really focused on today, but if you have any questions on any other itineraries, definitely reach out to Sheila. So what can we see in February and April? So if we're to go on this trip, February to beginning of the March, what's great is you might see some chicks too, adult penguins as well as adolescent penguins. So I love February because you get a few age ranges. If you only went in December, you'd only see the adults in Antarctica. I went in February and I was able to see some of the chicks as well as some of the adolescent penguins in addition to the adults. So it's really neat seeing a lot of the different types of stages of some of the penguins. A lot of whales at this time. I loved seeing humpback whales. I saw minke whales, orcas. There's 5 species of orcas that are in Antarctica all year round. And then, of course, I'll mention a little bit more, some more pictures of like glaciers and icebergs. Beaches and landing sites too are fascinating because the sun, if you're a photographer, I highly recommend going on this February, early March departure, because the sun is just beautiful to get really nice pictures of sun setting and sunrises. So the temperature does continue to drop going into early March. And so because we are coming out of getting into their fall again, but again, not as cold as we think it is. Definitely Ottawa. I'm in Toronto, even though we're a Seattle-based company. I'm in Toronto, so it's definitely, when we're in Antarctica, it hasn't been as cold in Antarctica as it has been here the last few weeks. So I had minus 22 here in Toronto a couple of weeks ago. So where to go on the Antarctic Peninsula? Now, we mentioned the Drake Shake and the convergence, the Antarctic convergence, and the Antarctic Circle. And so a lot of this trip will be on the west portion of the peninsula. So just to share with you, it'll be on the west portion. Our purpose of the crossing the circle on the Antarctic Peninsula, the purpose right away is to cross the Antarctic Circle. So we might make 1 or 2 landings on the way, but we really want to get to the crossing the circle and make that check mark, as well as have a fun little ceremony and celebration crossing into the Antarctic Circle. So that is with the Antarctic Peninsula, with the crossing the circle trip, that is the focus on the west side of the peninsula. The east portion of the peninsula, the ice is a little bit thicker, so that's why we technically do the crossing on the west. There's also gorgeous areas that you'll encounter, like the Lumiere Channel, one of my most favorite. It's I say one of my most favorite, which is terrible English, but I say it because there are so many beautiful places on the planet. But it was honestly one of the best places I've sailed and seen is the Lumiere Channel, which you'll get on the crossing the circle departure. Just stunning views. You have there's the ship, the small little expedition vessel with 2 mountain ranges on either side of you. It's just a gorgeous, peaceful channel. So some more highlights to see too, not only with whales and bird life, but also seals. I don't talk about seals enough, and they get a bad rap from me because it's simply because I should talk about them more because it is a highlight. The leopard seals or the crab eater seals. There's also the Weddell seals. So it's funny, you're just doing a little Zodiac cruise because we try and get off the ship as much as possible throughout the day. But I even love seeing them sunbathe, and you knew they had probably had a really great meal because they're just so relaxed. And the Zodiacs stay a safe distance apart from the seals, but it's really neat to turn off the engines and have a great view of the seals too. So a lot of history as well in Antarctica of abandoned whaling stations and things like that. So our historian really makes previous expeditions of previous Antarctic explorers come alive as well. So if you're into history, definitely Antarctica is a place to explore, and our historian makes it come alive. But what I thought polar history was quite dry and boring. But then when I got on the ship and our expedition team members would really share other information about explorers, I just find it so fascinating with the early explorers that went to Antarctica. But the penguins definitely are the stars of the show in Antarctica. Um, there's penguins. We go right into the rookeries. So definitely bring your nose plugs because I'm sure some of you on the line that have been, like Laura, can attest to the penguin poo, the guano. And so I don't even think about it when you're seeing it on TV or in pictures. The penguin poo is around and you can smell it in the penguin rookeries, but it's all part of the experience. And I loved the sounds of the penguins approaching a rookery and walking up to a rookery and hearing the squawking and of the penguins. It's amazing. And the sights to see, because some of the chicks will probably still be around in the middle of February. And it's neat seeing the parents feed the chicks too. So a great experience seeing penguins. And so you actually get off the ship with Quark Expeditions. It's a small vessel, so you're actually getting on the continent and you can walk amongst the penguins. We stay a safe distance from the penguins, but they're not afraid of humans. So even though, we're supposed to stay a certain distance away and our expedition team members do a briefing of what wildlife you can approach at a certain distance, the penguins will come up to you. I had a penguin come right in between my legs, kind of look up at me, have a little nibble of my pant leg, and then kept going. It was an incredible experience. Now, I mentioned whales, and I had an incredible experience because when I was in Antarctica, we were supposed to go on a landing site. And now this is, if you're scared of expedition travel and what the word expedition kind of means, it really honestly is just at every moment, the itinerary can change. Expect the unexpected. And that's what I feel in true expeditionary spirit. We were going on a landing site one morning in Antarctica, but we came across a mother humpback with her calf. And so instead of going on the landing for about 2.5 hours, we were in this bay with these 2 humpback whales. So the expedition team really, they do pivot if there's wildlife that appears, or if it's a little bit foggy and we can't do a particular landing site, or if it's windy. They really do pivot every moment. So some mornings on the itinerary or afternoons, you might even have TBA when you kind of look at the itinerary for that day when you wake up in the morning or before you go to bed in the evening before. So you might have like an area posted and then TBA. Well, we might see this and we might see that, but truly, it's neat to have not a set itinerary day by day, because you are expecting the unexpected in true expeditionary form. So if you're a photographer, we have photography programs on every departure. But this is an example of how close the wildlife can approach, because with our expedition team, it's our actual expedition team that are driving the Zodiacs, that are taking you out on excursions and on landing sites. Our expedition team, it's one expedition team member to 7 passengers. And so they're not only mingling with you during dinners and lunches, but they're out driving the Zodiac, sharing these experiences with you. And so the intimate moments of wildlife actually approaching the Zodiac. So these little rubber boats here, this is the Zodiac here. It's quite possible that wildlife approaches the Zodiac. So very safely, we keep the Zodiacs turned off for the wildlife. And it's amazing to have those peaceful encounters with whales. We even had an experience where we have stand-up paddleboarding in Antarctica, and these 10 stand-up paddleboarders that were out had a whale actually come up and surface. And one stand-up paddleboarder, it was a little too outside of their comfort zone. And so we had the Zodiac quickly pick them up and witness this amazing huge creature from the comfort of the Zodiac. So again, if something is really outside of a comfort zone, we're there every step of the way to make sure that you go back into either the ship or the safety of the Zodiac for you. So, there's great things that happen that can still be outside of someone's comfort zone in these areas. So that's just a fun story that I like to tell about whales. Glaciers of every imaginable size. If you've been to Alaska, highly recommend thinking about going to Antarctica. Beautiful, beautiful glaciers. It's just, it's neat that the glaciers are, fallen snow that over many years have been compressed into large thickened ice masses. And I just love when our glaciologist explains more about glaciers and icebergs. And it's just, you never get sick of ice. It's just so peaceful. It's just so beautiful. So I didn't experience an Antarctica calving glacier, but I know some people did. So when the huge chunks fall from the glaciers, I know some people from even the ship, when they were out on the stern of the vessel with a glass of wine or hot chocolate, I know that some people that really were trying to stay out on deck as much as possible did hear that as well. Because sometimes I did stay inside and journal or catch up from what I'd seen that day. So you never know what you're going to see even being out on deck. So we encourage everyone to get out on deck as much as possible. But I love icebergs. Just really peaceful. What's neat about icebergs is the expedition team member that I was with decided to turn off the engine and say, "What do you hear?" And there was an amazing silence and a peacefulness. But then all of a sudden, an iceberg kind of floated a little bit closer to us, and there was an I realized that it was a snap, crackle, and pop sound that the iceberg was making, and so this was the sound of like the air bubbles in the ice. So it was really neat to know that it sounded like a bowl of Rice Krispie squares or Rice Krispies there in the Zodiac while I was listening to the iceberg. It was kind of a neat sensation and a nice sound to hear. So it's neat that only 10% of what you actually see on an iceberg is actually above the water as well. So a lot of it. So we do keep our safe distance because the icebergs can roll. So safety is our number one. So it's great shots though that I've been able to take with icebergs. And I'm not a photographer. I loved even using my own camera phone. And so some of the shots of icebergs, I never get sick of ice. I really don't. It's just so beautiful. It's like a piece of art you'll never see again because it won't stay the same shape. So the sunsets, sunrises, and Zodiac cruises are spectacular. I love sometimes getting up even before breakfast. Some of our expedition team members will run sometimes sunset or sunrise and sunset Zodiac cruises. And so if before breakfast, you're an early riser, I've had that experience as well in Antarctica, where it was like a third excursion that day, where it was an evening sunset cruise or a morning one. One of the evening ones that we had in Antarctica was we were all in the bar listening to a great bar talk, because in the evening, it's not like a traditional cruise where you have, you know, a lot of musicians and things like that and dancers going on. So it is an expedition cruise in the sense there's not a lot of evening entertainment in the sense of traditional cruising. But what I love is our expedition team, they tell stories. And so it's kind of like a pub talk, bar talk in the evenings. So this bar talk was going on, and I had my glass of red wine. But our marine biologist came on the loudspeaker and said, sorry to interrupt the bar talk, but whoever wants to come in the Zodiacs for a third excursion today, grab your parkas, grab your boots, and come on down. Now, of course, some people stayed in the bar, really enjoyed what they were doing, and didn't want to go, and they had an exhausting day. And then others grabbed their parkas, grabbed their boots, grabbed their waterproof pants, and there were 40 crab eater seals gathering krill at sunset. And so it was something that in the 17 years that that marine biologist had been traveling with us to Antarctica, he hadn't even seen it. So he was so excited to see it himself that he wanted other people to see it too. So those are some experiences that you could potentially have when you're traveling with us to Antarctica. So again, Antarctica in depth. It's a perfect trip that Sheila is really honed in on. I feel like it has a lot of more opportunities to actually do continent landings, more opportunities to see wildlife. Some of the trips are 11 days, and it tends to be a little bit short because 2 days is the Drake Passage there, and 2 days almost is the Drake Passage back. Typically, a day and a half to 2 days in each direction, depending on weather. So, that shaves the 4 days off of an itinerary, and then your day in Ushuaia. So, and then your 14th day is disembarking. So I love the 14-day trips, not only because you're crossing the Antarctic Circle, but also because it's a more opportunity to see wildlife, see beautiful mountain ranges, and go into deep fjords and explore this region. Now, there's a lot of adventure options included in our trips. So when you book any trip with Sheila for going to the polar regions, there's Zodiac cruising included and hiking, the infamous polar plunge. So if you want to, I know that I think Laura, who was on the line earlier, you did the polar plunge as well, I think, and I did the polar plunge in the Arctic. Did not do in Antarctica. That's a little secret I'm sharing with you today. I've been to the Antarctic a few times, and I have not done it yet. I don't know. It was just the mood, and I loved watching other people participate. So if you don't do it, that's fine. But now I have to go back. And so it's just, these are some great things that are included in the photography programs as well. So there's a lot that's included in the regular program. But there are additional activities. So with the Crossing the Circle departure that Sheila has picked, there is still one kayaking spot left. So if you are an avid sea kayaker and you want to go to the polar regions to kayak, please mention that to Sheila, and we can see what we can do for you for an additional adventure option for you. I mentioned our expedition team earlier, and one thing that's really extra special, this is one of the reasons why I've been with this company for over 12 years. I really do feel like our expedition team, it's not only where we're traveling to, but who we're traveling with, and I feel like they are the best in the industry. But we were the first polar expedition company to institute our own training program. So in 2017, we launched our Quark Academy program. This just reminds people that we do have a standard level of training and safety that surpasses a lot of industry standards because we do believe it's the ultimate benefit to you for traveling with us, and also the ultimate protection of the polar regions that we are visiting. So I did want to mention we do have the most experienced team in the polar regions. I did mention one expedition team member to 7 passengers, which is huge. That's not including ship crew at all. That's expedition team alone. So just really, I really can't say it enough. This is one of the biggest reasons to choose Quark Expeditions for your polar trip. I won't go over all of our fleet, so definitely reach out to Sheila if you're interested in, really luxurious vessels like our World Explorer. We have an all balcony, all suite vessel. But all small expedition vessels, all under 200 passengers. But what I did want to highlight to you today is the ship that Sheila's chosen for her group. It's a fantastic expedition vessel, only 189 passengers. It's a favorite vessel among a lot of past passengers with us. So a lot of comments that have come back previously, you'd be very comfortable on this vessel. She inspires friendly onboard community, lecture rooms, and great libraries and things like that. All outside cabins as well on the Ocean Diamond. So she's a great vessel, one of the fastest ships actually in Antarctica. And so I really enjoy this vessel. Great panoramic observation lounge that you'll probably spend a lot of your time in as one of a really big feature of this. I'll just show you here. But a lot of people like the stern of this vessel as well. And so they spend a lot of time viewing wildlife and ice and scenery on the comfort of the stern on this vessel too. So everyone dines together. It's one dining room on this vessel. So the onboard experience is wonderful too. I know we talk a lot about the off-ship experience, which is what we're really known for, but our on-ship experience is wonderful too, like chef-prepared meals, exercise rooms if you did want that. So great themed events throughout the trip too. We have briefings and recaps. So I did mention the lectures, the educational programs throughout the trip, but I love our daily recaps. So when you get back on board, right before dinner, there's usually a daily recap of what people have seen. So the expedition team member that specializes in what you've seen that day shares a little bit. It's very fun time. And then our expedition leader comes on and shares what you might see the next day and where you're headed. And then you go right into dinner. So it's a really great way to have a cocktail, sit back and relax, or a cup of tea and warm up from your day, or relax and before dinner. But the onboard learning never stops. I love, if you want that hands-on experience, our expedition team are always on the lookout. What I love too, what you get with no other operator, is our expedition team is 24 hours a day on the bridge looking for wildlife, or on the deck looking for wildlife. Literally, they take a schedule and people sign up for 30 or an hour shifts. And so we will gently wake you up at 3 or 4 in the morning if we see something that we think is worth waking everyone up for. Of course, you can stay in your cabin in your comfy, cozy bed with your duvet and not get out. But we gently wake people up in case if they do want to see a particular something. For instance, at 3 in the morning, I use 3 as an example because that's when I was woken up. It was a little iceberg, and we were encouraged to see it was one little lonely emperor penguin on an iceberg. And so I did want to see it. It was quite far away, but it was still great to see with the naked eye in addition to my binoculars. And I did wake up for that. So that is an example of what we would wake someone up for at 3 in the morning gently. Lots of opportunities to not only connect with our expedition team though on board, but with like-minded travelers like yourselves. I keep in touch with people from Switzerland. I keep in touch with someone from Calgary that I met on one of my trips. So there's great like-minded individuals too. So if you want your alone time and maybe you want to have dinner with just the person you're traveling with, that's fine too. But there's lots of opportunity to connect and have dinners and meals with other people on board, and go out on deck and meet new people. I really feel like this is a highlight too, traveling with Quark. Great wellness center, exercise room, like I mentioned earlier, fantastic lounge and bar. And with the lounge and bar, booking with Sheila on any trip with Quark Expeditions, but I like highlighting it, you get a onboard credit. So a $250 US onboard ship credit to use. So that's one of the many benefits of booking with Sheila, being a preferred partner of ours. So you can use that in the bar or in the gift shop. So that's a great thing to have when you're booking your trip. I do want to talk a little bit about sustainability for just a minute or so. It's always been a part of our DNA. We came out with a polar promise in the spring of 2019. We actually unveiled this strategy. So please reach out to Sheila if you want a copy of our actual report. It's a public document. And so we really do believe in people being polar ambassadors when they come back. So when you do come to Antarctica with us, or you do think about coming to the Arctic, people come back changed. And that's really important part of our polar promise is our ambassador program. We do partner too with communities, with organizations like the Save the Albatross Foundation, and areas like Penguin penguin lifelines and areas that help educate and promote these areas. And also Polar Bears International, for example, for one that we do in the Arctic, or the UN Clean Seas Initiative. So we really partner too with a lot of organizations. Sheila mentioned me mentioning health and safety this during this presentation, because that's something that I haven't mentioned in the past, and I think it's a great opportunity to share, Sheila. So I'm glad that you brought this up, because we're an industry leader in health and safety, and it has been a number one priority for us since the beginning. But with COVID-19, it has obviously reinforced our commitment to safety for when you do travel with us, not only for you, but also our crew and the areas in which we visit, whether it's a research base or communities in the Arctic. So while we continue to build out a plan, I do want to share with you the 4 pillars of health and safety. So that is the clean ships, healthy fellow passengers such as yourselves when you come and travel with us, but also the healthy expedition environment and healthy crew. So with that, we did launch our Quark Expedition Safe COVID policy. So Sheila can share a little 5-minute video as well if you want more information, for a message from our president that just was released a few weeks ago. So we do have state-of-the-art testing and health protocols on board. This is even going to be including rapid COVID-19 tests on board. We even last March, so a year ago today, we were actually had ships coming back from Antarctica, and we had 3 ships. One that actually had to be quarantined in the port of Ushuaia because she was only out of the country for 12 days, and you needed to be out of the country for over 14 days to not be quarantined. So we had passengers for 6 more days on that ship after their Antarctic trip, and it was amazing to see the expedition team keep their spirit alive. But my point in saying this is we were even due temperature checks in January, February of last year, right when the pandemic was starting to be really talked about and on everyone's radar. So but this is just an example of what we're doing on board too, in addition to prior to boarding. So COVID tests 72 hours before boarding. Things might change and shift and evolve prior to February of when Sheila's trip is. But I just want to know that this is very much on our radar, and we have a lot of experts in various industries, not only within our company in the cruising industry, but also in the medical industry. But we also have amazing anytime cancellation and rebooking. So if you do book with Sheila, mention that and ask about that. And Sheila also has on her particular departure a low deposit, 10% only for her bookings, which now it's actually 20%. So that's a great benefit too with booking with Sheila for this departure. I love being free from the crowds in the heart of the polar regions too, and that is what the F stands for in our safe COVID policy. And it's amazing. Again, those is that I was talking about the escapist type of traveler, and that is amazing that with the Zodiacs, you're in the fresh air. It's not covered, so it's a great way to travel. And once you're on landings, you can go on your own and be on your own for a bit too, which these wide open spaces are really beneficial to you. And then the experience will not be compromised. So whether it's on board or on landings, we do know that we will deliver an incredible experience in the polar regions. You know, we do even have isolation cabins on board. So we've set aside cabins in the event something did happen, not only with COVID, but with another illness for a passenger. So lots of things like that we have in place. So please feel free, if you want more information, I can always jump on a call with you and Sheila if you want more details. We do have an amazing book with confidence policy out too that I mentioned. So you do have peace of mind when you book with Sheila to book a polar trip with Quark. So you have, you know, confidence from booking to boarding. We do have you covered all of the way with Sheila. So there's no rebooking fees too. So if you want to cancel for any reason up to 24 hours prior to departure, you can rebook and do that. And there's a future travel credit guarantee as well. So lots of things to chat about, but I'm trying to keep it short, but there's so much to talk about. We've just touched the tip of the iceberg, so to speak. But I hope I've given you some new things to think about if you've been thinking about a trip to Antarctica or if you've already booked your trip to Antarctica. So I'm so grateful that some of you are on as well. I love talking about the polar regions, and there's such a magic in Antarctica, and a silence. It really does feel like you're on another planet. It's one of the most beautiful planets on the Earth, parts of the planet of the world. It's just so beautiful. And so thank you so much, Sheila, for having me today. So please reach out to Sheila if you have any questions, and we're always chatting. So if you have any questions now, please feel free to reach out. And if you're thinking of something later too, something might come to mind in a week or so.
That's awesome. Thank you, Kara. It's great to have you here. I've had a couple of people pop on and pop off. I mentioned it's a beautiful 14-degree day here in Ottawa. So the folks who've stayed on the call, thank you very much. You're the hardiest of the lot. We are recording those, so I will send the link to people who wanted to get outside and enjoyed some of our fantastic weather. While Kara has a drink there, if you're tired from all that talking, before we turn it over for a couple of questions, I just wanted to remind people, last week I hosted Silver Sea Cruises. The week prior was AMA Waterways. And next week I am hosting Wilderness Safaris. Wilderness Safaris will actually do it at 5 o'clock Cape Town time, because my partner Allison is going to be participating from Cape Town, South Africa. So we will back it up earlier than the normal 5 p.m. Eastern, because that would be midnight to her. So if you're available next Tuesday for Travel Tuesday at 10 a.m., I'll send out the link afterwards as well. And with that, let me just check the questions. I know Laura had mentioned when she went in January, she didn't have the smell of the penguin poop. She missed it because she was early in the season.
That's funny. There you go. That's funny.
Laura has a picture where she's showing waves come up over the front of the ship. Oh, maybe you changed her picture, did you? Or is that, no? Okay.
Yeah, now I'm just showing that they're like how close the penguins come to you. There's a whole bunch of penguins that were sitting on their nests, and this little guy saw me taking pictures and decided to come over and say hi.
How cool.
I don't know if you want to put it towards the instead of share, you can see more of it gets bigger, the picture, but
yeah, sure. Just one sec. I'm just making sure having dinner and the call came on the loudspeaker that there's a pod of orcas outside and you all dropped your dinner and ran to see the orca pod. That's one of the neat things about expedition ships, is that you can follow nature and the wildlife and just take it all in, right, Kara?
That's exactly it. It truly is. I think expedition, really, that's exactly what it means, is like, you'll be interrupted in a meal or interrupted in your sleep, or you think you're going to go on a landing site and see one thing and you see something completely different. I love that story, Laura, that you interrupted lunch or dinner for the pod of orcas, because that's truly an expedition. That's really the nature of expedition. So when people are thinking, oh, an expedition, it might be too much for me. Honestly, it's for so many different levels of activity. So for a leisure traveler as well as an active traveler, expedition really is expecting the unexpected.
Very cool. And it's, you mentioned it was 189 passengers on board. So it's a totally different experience than the bigger ships, much more intimate. And it's all about an authentic experience and surrounding yourself with nature and wildlife.
Yeah, Sheila, you bring up such a good point. As soon as you get on a ship that's 250, 300, 500 passengers, although it's a great, great experience, everyone's not getting off the ship as much as possible. Everyone's not getting off the ship at the same time. So it really is a different type of Antarctic experience.
And I love that you mentioned it's twice the size of Australia. Kind of puts it in perspective. I was doing an Australia webinar with some colleagues earlier today, and it was just, they take the map of Australia and they put it over the continental US, and it's the same size roughly. So, you know, we tend to think of it being twice the size of Australia. That's twice the size of the US. So it just kind of puts it in perspective there in terms of how large the Antarctic peninsula, not the peninsula, the continent is.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
Are you guys following the icebergs that broke off from the shelf or anything?
No,
like
I
that?
need to look that up.
Yeah, it's pretty fascinating to watch. A little scary, but fascinating too. Laura, what are your pictures? You have your penguins there. Oh, you're on mute. I think, folks, if you want to come
Yeah,
on,
we
you
saw
can.
lots and lots of penguins. There's like,
Oh,
we saw 7 different types, I think. And when the time that I was there, they were still little chicks. Like they had just been hatched. They were just teeny tiny little babies. It's like, just like they were basically still being sat on.
oh,
That's one of
very
the waves.
cool. Yeah, those are some pretty big waves. That's the picture you mentioned with the waves.
Yeah. You weren't allowed out on the deck that day. And yeah, there's all kinds of different kinds of penguins. They're the funniest looking ones, and they waddle around. They get in the water and they're like torpedoes. They just take off. And
Very cool. Philip is mentioning he'd be too busy running to photograph the polar bear. And Denise is noting she's looking forward to the trip. Bill, nice to have you on. Did you come on an earlier call as well? You're on mute, but nice to see you.
Yeah, I did.
Oh, good. You're looking forward to the group as well, no doubt.
Yeah. I was just thinking about the kayaking. You have to have any experience, because I don't. For sea kayaking?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So if you don't have any experience at all, but you're, relatively you find that you've done other activities, it can be possible. We always like to say for the sea kayaking program that you have some level of kayaking experience. And then with the paddling, the actual inflatable kayaks, that's for any level of experience. Yeah, good point. Great question.
Okay.
that's how close the penguins get.
Oh, look at that. That's very cool.
He just decided to walk over to me. There's a whole bunch of them that were on their nesting site. And yeah, this one guy just decided to come say hi.
Very cool. Very cool. So, Kara, you mentioned there is one spot left on the kayaking, right? So it is something that
there's
books
one
up.
spot left. Yeah, it does book up quite quickly. If someone else isn't interested in getting on the kayaking program and there's not availability, Sheila and I can just be in touch with with each other, because usually people sign up and then about 120 days prior to the departure, when the full payment is due, sometimes people think, oh, maybe I don't want to do an extra excursion, because there's so much to do in the included program.
Very
So
cool.
we can always revisit the kayaking list.
And this sailing is pretty much sold out except for my group, right? And we have
this sailing is sold out except for your group, which is great. So it's special with Sheila's group, with special group rate, special Sheila price for your group, and low deposits. And yeah, this is, if you booked with Quark right now, you wouldn't be able to find the space, or you booked, this is exclusive to Sheila, which is great, which is really exciting.
So if the folks that are going, great. If you want to have any friends you want to encourage, I have the last space on the ship, and it's so popular. That's why we wanted to do another call now, because obviously there's demand. So if any, I wanted to reach out to my clients again and just say, if you want the space, please let me know, because it's a fantastic itinerary, great price, and a great opportunity.
How many spots have you got open, Sheila?
I have currently 7 cabins, I believe. I have 4 twin obstructed, 2 suites, and 1 twin window. So I thought I'd reach out to folks again and just make sure, because the rest of the ship is completely sold out. And the thing, when 2020, 2021 was suspended, all those folks got reaccommodated. So there was more pressure on this sailing too. But now, of course, people are starting to book again. That's one of the things Kara and I were talking about just as we started chatting, is that I am sensing from my own clients that since March came in, and especially the past 2 weeks, there's more optimism. You know, we can see that the vaccine's coming, right? And the 14-degree weather doesn't hurt outside, but there's certainly, if we're not vaccinated yet, there's a feeling that it is coming. It is coming in, you know, and it's making people want to book and have something on the books, something to look forward to. And what a bucket list trip this is. You know, we couldn't travel in 2020, so we doubled down in 2022.
I'm glad it's going so well, because I was wondering if people were still iffy about taking cruises. So great.
Well,
Yeah,
the one
people
thing
are really excited to travel again. I think there's a lot of pent up demand, and especially traveling to these kind of out of the box locations. I think people are really excited to dream and get there.
a lot of pent up demand. And as Kara was saying, you guys have done the work with the health and safety standards and protocols too. So Philip is saying it looks like an interesting trip and he'd love to see the penguins. So Kara, thank you so much. Appreciate your time. Any last minute questions from folks?
Those penguins would love to see you too.
Well, thank you so much. We really appreciate it. I hope you have a wonderful evening. Sorry, Julia, did you have a question or you just, oh, you're on mute. Sorry.
I was just thinking about room sharing. Do you have provisions for that? Or?
I have a couple of solo people who were booked and they still got the solo cabin, but there may be, if you were interested in sharing a room with someone, the cabins I have left are double, but I could always put feelers out to other solo ladies if that's something you wanted to explore.
And also we could also think about, Sheila, a single supplement rate on one of those cabins too, like on this twin obstructed. Yeah, we can also look into that.
Okay. Yep. Let me coordinate.
I don't know if they still do, but they found me a room share person.
Yeah, so in Sheila's group, we can absolutely do sharing, which is great, sharing with another female traveler or another male traveler, depending. And but you know, there's still opportunities for a single supplement if you really do want to go by yourself.
So two options: a solo cabin versus sharing with someone. But there is demand on it. So let me reach out to Kara after Julia, and I'll circle back to you, and we can just explore what's possible for you.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, everyone, so much. Have a wonderful evening. Go enjoy the sunshine while it's here, and we'll dream of those 14-degree days in Antarctica, Laura.
Yeah, that's the ship my background. That's the ship I took when I was there. The Quark.
Very cool. And look at the penguin too. Is that one of your shots?
Yeah, we were at one of the stops and the penguins posed. That was one of the landings.
That is awesome. Thank you very much,
they
everyone. Take care.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Just like we're
Very cool.